This week's show brought to you by efficient shooting. Why don't more people do it? Welcome back to another Boxscore Geek show. So there's a lot of NBA to talk, but you know what? We're actually going to take a step back and discuss one of my favorite posts that I've ever put together, probably one of the posts with the most work, and as a result, we also have a special guest. So I am, of course, if you don't know, talking about Art Rondeau, the starting point guard for the Chicago Bulls. Say, hey, Art.
If only that were true.
I was going to say, you might actually shoot better than him if they put you in, candidly. Art Rondeau, spelled completely different, but you are a data analyst by day and one of the unheralded, most interesting analytics stories in the NBA by night. And we're going to discuss some work you did with Allan Houston, which is one of the most fascinating bits of data, stories, it's candidly, Art. Apologies, I'm hogging the mic instead of letting you introduce yourself. In a more perfect world where I was like a writer and had a bunch of free time instead of like a kid in a podcast that takes up the spare time I do have, this feels like a book to me, candidly. There have been NBA history books written on less interesting subjects, to be honest. Not insulting any specific NBA books, just saying this is interesting. So we're going to talk about the work that you did with Allan Houston in the 1999-2000 NBA season, which, as mentioned, if you're a fan of the Boxscore Geeks, was a post months back at this point. I think it was pre-kid for me, so it's all a blur, candidly.
Yeah, July 11th, I think, is when you put it up initially. So, yep. And by the way, don't feel bad about hogging the mic. You were saying great things about me. You can just keep on rolling if you want.
Is there anything else you want to plug about yourself before we get going? You have a blog, which is, how am I dropping the name? It's sorry, go ahead.
It's Game Time at the Garden of Good and Evil, which is about my work. A lot of it's about my work with the Knicks, and I followed the Knicks and blog about them. I haven't blogged in a while, so and then I'm on Twitter at Art Rondeau, ARTRONDEAU, and you can get all my info from there, including a link to the blog. I'm about to actually blog something about healthcare and saving the Affordable Care Act with money that's already being collected for somebody else. So we'll see. That should go out maybe by the weekend. So,
oh man, you were looking for a subject to get me going, because all of that. I will say, just as kind of an exclamation point on the Affordable Care Act, may not be perfect, but if you're a self-employed person, being able to actually, even if it's not great, being able to afford healthcare, it's hugely valuable to being able to be self-employed. So,
absolutely.
I got nothing. But all I was gonna say, got off track. Sorry, rookie mistake for getting the blog title. But we said it a bunch, so hopefully people will know it, and hopefully you'll be blogging a lot more. I know you've been busy. You were busy with like summer league, hustling around, talking to people in the NBA. Hopefully about the study we did together, which we're going to come back to. So, story is, this is fascinating. I hope you don't mind if I just recap some of that, Art.
Please do.
Okay, so for those of you who haven't read the blog post, story is in the 1998-1999 2000 season, you are working with, it's Dudley is the last name. I almost said Jared. Chris Dudley. You're working with Chris Dudley, who, this is such a shame to me, had problems shooting. You helped him out with his shooting, but unfortunately he's just, by the time you've gotten to him, he's broken down. I think he falls apart a season or two later. So sounds from all the stuff you've said about him, he's a great guy. You're working with him on the Knicks, helping him with his shooting. It's helping him, but he's kind of, past his prime. Same season, though. This is the 1998-1999 season when the Knicks go all the way to the NBA Finals. But basically, Allan Houston, who is this star, in theory, I'll put in quotes, by the wins produced numbers, he's, an Allen Iverson star at this point in his career. He's been signed to a big contract by, the Knicks traded for him. They're about to sign him to a big contract. And he's just not living up to snuff. But he sees you helping out Chris Dudley. Says, can you help me out? You help him out for one game, which is against, God, I hate the New Orleans Charlotte. So you'll say the team names. We actually get the city name.
Charlotte Hornets, yep.
Yeah, it was going to be like the Charlotte Pelicans. So the Charlotte.
There we go.
So you actually help him out. Plays an amazing game. I think we've put the numbers together. It's one of the best 20 games of his career when all is said and done.
I believe so.
And this season, the Knicks are such a Cinderella story because it's such a razor thin margin that they even get into the playoffs, that they even beat these teams, that they even get all the way to the finals. So, we normally aren't huge fans of the narrative of like the must win game. But the amazing part is we actually have some backstory about one of these must win games, because usually we just get to look at them 10,000 feet up. We don't know the stories, circumstances surrounding it. That could just go to the wayside, except you get hired by Allan Houston the next season, 1999-2000, to help him out. And there's a lot of, drama and whatever involved, which sucks for you, Art. And hindsight, everybody listening to this, Art had to go through so much pain. But the funny story, this is me being an analytics guy, is it all winds up with the perfect analytics study. Because you'll notice us, me and Brian, every week we come on and we bash these on-off statistics. We bash these plus-minus statistics. We bash these sample sizes that are too small. And we're always going, these sample sizes aren't big enough. These sample sizes aren't comparable. This study is useless. You can't use on-off data. Kevin Pelton, when you're saying Nurkic's going to play great in Portland, I'm so peeved that he actually is. But when he says that, we go, you do not have enough data to do anything with that. But you go through all this pain, Art, and you get a perfect data set because you coach Allan Houston for about 30 games and you don't coach him for about 50, and they're split up pretty evenly. Home, away, different levels of competition, different caliber. So perfect, same difference of I just said home and away twice, but all of these different variables almost broken down perfectly where we can say, what does Allan look like with Art? And what does Allan look like without Art? And Art, I'm going to let you toot your own horn here. How good does Allan look with you?
Well, he looks pretty good. Based on your study, he looks even better. So I'm very grateful for that. I know when I sent you the data, your comment was, and you and I've known each other for a long time, and I think we're pretty good about being honest with each other when we talk, and had a lot of good discussions. And you said, I think. It's probably going to be, gee, this is nice, but there's a lot of noise. There's not enough, supporting data here. And as it turned out, because of the weird season that Allan and I had together, as you said, it broke up pretty nicely. If I'd worked together with him for all 82 regular season games, there'd be no way of actually telling, was it me or was it something else?
Yeah. James, like what's interesting is players certainly have jumps, and the nice part about this is, if James Harden has an outlier season, which we thought he did 2 seasons back, but apparently he's back, and we look at the whole season and we can't see any distinguishing reasons, we can just say, hey, this season's an outlier. This gives us a very clear reason. Like this is very clearly a blip. I think if you probably have the study up, Brian, but I'm assuming if you go to Allan Houston's actual career stats, what's important to notice here is Allan Houston, I called him at the start of the show an Allen Iverson star, because Allen Iverson is this player that's just overrated, but people called him a star. If you look, Allan Houston in 1999-2000, according to our numbers, points over par, -0.1, which is right about average. 0 would be average. So the best season in his career, he was an average player. The rest of his career, he's a below average player, and in some cases, like his rookie year, significantly below average. So, this was remarkable because basically this season is such an outlier. And something I haven't gotten around to doing, Art, you helped me make some fun metrics we'll probably discuss. But a metric I would love to look at is actually the Allan Houston single season prime, because I would be curious if it is as easy to take a player like, say, Michael Jordan and take their best 30 games and their worst 50 games, or some ratio to that effect, if I could find a split as dramatic as Allan was in this season. Because there's home and away splits. The Nuggets and the Jazz are much better at home than away. We're used to that. I have not had the time to do the study, but I cannot believe that it is typical to have a player play this different between 2 sets. Even if I allow, if this makes any sense, self-selection. If I'm allowed to cherry pick the 30 best games and cherry pick the first 50, I don't think I'm able to find that many players with a discrepancy this big.
Well, that's an interesting comment. I would love to track that down, and another 16 years, and your son will be out, and you'll have time. So we'll check it out. One thing I'd like to do, if I could, just real quickly, because you and I know my background, and I'd like to explain a little bit so people could kind of follow here. So the Chris Dudley stuff, many years ago, I figured out why big men have problems shooting free throws. It's got nothing to do with what's in the books. And I've done quite a lot of work. I've got a program, and it used to be 100% physical, but then I learned that I needed to have some of it mental. So I developed kind of a supercharged sports psychology using neurolinguistic programming, NLP. You can look that up, and just don't look at Wikipedia, because whoever wrote the article on there really has some problems. But anyway, so what happened with Chris? So this mental piece, I was just using it to help people be more confident and change their beliefs about how well they could shoot, things like that. And then I found out that I could use it with athletes that were in slumps, and I was able to do that with pro tennis, pro golf, World Cup gold skier. He won the gold medal 2 days after we worked together in an event that they were going to drop him from because he was so bad in it. But I was looking for somebody that a situation where I could be visible and work with somebody over a period of time, because I knew that I had to have some kind of statistical data. So what happened in 98, 99, I was working with Chris Dudley, and he ended up having his career best made free throw streak. They used to interview him if he made 2 in a row in a game. There'd be a big deal about it. As it turned out, we got him perfect over 4 games, which made national news. And you may have seen the montage on ESPN over the last couple of years where Shaq's going in for this monster 2-handed dunk at the Lakers, wraps his leg. Yep, he wraps his legs around Chris Dudley and takes Chris down to the floor. Well, Chris gets up and he's hurt his hip, and of course there's no foul because he's Chris Dudley. And Chris, type 1 diabetic, not the most athletic person, played the game well. But with all those, you'd say, okay, maybe they give him the benefit of the doubt every now and then and blow the whistle for him, and they don't. So Chris finds out there's no foul. Shaq's gone to half court. Chris picks up the ball, and he's, for all the awkwardness of a 6'10" body that he grew into late, he'd been a shortstop before that, so he had great hand-eye coordination, throws the ball and hits Shaq in the butt, gets tossed out of the game. So I'm looking for Chris afterwards, because I'm supposed to meet up with him to schedule time to do some work, and he's not there. So I walk over. The only player I can see is somebody I don't know. Turns out to be Allan Houston. And I ask him where the team's staying. He says, well, why would I tell you? And I said, well, I'm the guy working with Chris on his free throws. Well, he just had that, national media exposure. And so Allan says, oh, you're doing a great job, et cetera, et cetera. We talked for a minute or two. And then, as I said, Chris got injured. So a couple of weeks later, when he's healed, I fly from California out to New York to Purchase, where they used to practice at SUNY Purchase, because I want to get him back on track. Allan swings by to say hello because he knows me from LA, and then I find out that Allan's in a 13-game slump, and they want to change his motion. And that's the big problem with when somebody goes into a slump is about the last thing you want to do is change the motion. Sometimes you have to, but you really want to try to figure out, is there something going on? Obviously, if he was injured, they wouldn't change the motion. In this case, it was just, players go into their zone. Most of the time, they don't know how they get there. I'm able to help them figure out what's going on in their head when they're playing their best and show them how to get there on a regular basis. So I told Allan, listen, if we go to your house tomorrow night before the game, we do a session. It's going to take like between 1 and 2 hours. I said, you're going to shoot really well Friday night against the Charlotte Hornets. So he doesn't want to mess with his motion. And I've got some credibility with him because of what had happened with Chris Dudley. So we do the session. He goes for 30 points against Charlotte, 10 for 17 overall. I don't remember. I think you've got the stats someplace in the study, in fact, but for how we did in threes versus twos.
The funny thing is he's 66.7% at both.
Oh, excellent.
So, perfect from the line, 81% true shooting. Now, I've started compiling a list of like best players of the week. And so he was plus 6.5 points over par, which wouldn't normally make one of my lists, but is still darn good. Like playing that level is kind of playing better than James Harden. For comparison, it's a couple points better than James Harden is playing right now for the season.
Wow. Okay. Well, as it turns out, they win the game by 5 points. So if he scores 24 or fewer, they lose that game. Well, I mean, all other things being equal. Well, they get to the end of the regular season. And I mean, this was a bizarre season. This is the one where Latrell Sprewell joins the team. It's the one where Jeff Van Gundy doesn't play the players that Ernie Grunfeld traded Charles Oakley for. He doesn't play him as much as people think he should until Ernie gets forced out. And then next thing you know, those guys are starting.
I'm laughing, by the way, as we were bashing the Wizards a while back, and obviously Ernie Grunfeld came up. So.
Yes, okay, but as far as that particular season, having Camby and Sprewell was a major deal. So anyway, as it turns out, they finish in 8th place in the in regular season standings. Charlotte finishes 1 game behind them. If Charlotte had won the night that Allan and I'd worked together, they take 8th place. They go to the playoffs. The Knicks go to the lottery. Instead, the Knicks make it all the way to the finals, which, I had nothing to do with. I helped them. I'm one of the pieces that helped them get to the playoffs. But after that, they were on their own, and they had an incredible run.
Well, there are 2 notes on that, because we've kind of said this a lot about teams that succeed. A team that goes to the finals is not usually done by one player. And even the players, there have only, I think, been a couple instances. I'd give you maybe Shaq in 01 and Larry Bird, I forget which of the years, one of the years in the 80s. Larry Bird and Shaq are 2 players that did, in the playoffs, go into, Super Saiyan mode and carry their team. But it's very rare for a team to just be one piece that moves a team all the way. So right. That's one thing I really like. And one reason I really like you, and one reason I keep talking to you, is that you have all these people that are analytics people that are very confident, and my metric is the best. And I know some people think we're being self-referential, but whatever. My metric is the best. I know everything. I'm so confident. This will work. This Joel Embiid will be the best player ever, which I'm still chuckling at. But you said that, which I really appreciate, because it's true. For any good team, any successful team takes lots of moving parts to come together. The team that the Knicks fell apart to, the San Antonio Spurs, required some amazing luck, right? It's this 1 in a million chance, less than that, obviously. I think it was like 15% or whatever. There's very low chance that they're going to end up with Tim Duncan. So, finals teams require luck. But you helped me. I really want to give you credit. I think I try and mention it every couple of times I bring up the metric. You helped me come up with one of my favorite metrics, which I call the game changer metric. And this was entirely from this study, because what happened is you asked me how good Allan Houston played that game. And I said, this many wins, this many points over par, blah, 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 blah. I move on. And you said, well, obviously this game was important. And then, of course, if we talk more about the 99-2000 season, the number of games the Knicks had to win that ended up with Jeff Van Gundy getting to coach the All-Star game is important. And in both cases, you said, the importance obviously is the wins. This win got them into the playoffs. These wins got Jeff Van Gundy to the All-Star game, and arguably Allan Houston an All-Star nod. Is there any way you can quantify that? Because we've always kind of stuck in wins, and even with points, that's not necessary. So I looked at it and I said, well, they won by 5 points. The numbers say that Allan was responsible for roughly 6.5 of them. So if you replace Allan with an average player, not replacement level, average, like just an average starter, yeah, they would have lost that game if it had been an average player instead of Allan's performance that game. And obviously, I've used that metrics many times since. I've looked at Kobe Bryant versus Tim Duncan. The great players, this season, they're players that have put up. LeBron James, shockingly at the start of the season, is a huge game changer. It's one of my favorite metrics that I've come up with as a result, and it was all a result of this study.
Oh, well, I'm glad that you did me a favor by doing the study, so I'm glad that something good for you came out of it as well. So,
well, what's truly fascinating about the study, is there anything else you want to say about the 99-2000 or the 98-99 season with you getting in to work with Allan? And we can move into the 99-2000, sure, and you can say anything specific you want, sure, there.
Well, I'll tell you one thing that I was pretty happy about when they got to the finals. There were actually 2 things in the finals. First of all, I watched game 1, and Chris was starting because Patrick Ewing was injured, so he couldn't play. And Chris had a habit that a lot of bad free throw shooters have, which is when he caught the ball on offense, which they didn't give him the ball that much, but he would shoot it immediately because they want to get it off before they get fouled because they don't want to go to the line. So, well, it makes sense, but it made them. I noticed that David Robinson blocked a couple of Chris's shots and all this, and so I called Chris after game one and I said, "Listen, this is what's happening. So if you can get Jeff to run a play for you early in the game, give a head and shoulders fake because Duncan and Robinson are both jumping as soon as you catch the ball." I said, maybe you can get one of them in foul trouble, So sure enough, first play of the game goes to Chris Dudley, head and shoulders fake. Robinson and Duncan are in the air. They come down, they hammer him to the ground. And Dudley's called for travel because it's Chris Dudley. So, but anyway, I thought it was pretty cool. And the thing that's amazing, that we have numbers that a lot of times contradict what we think we're seeing. We think somebody's having a career year and all of a sudden we find out, they're really not doing that well for a number of reasons.
I have to do a brief tangent. There was no way this was going to come up, but you gave the perfect segue, Art. This is how myself and Brian have been feeling about Kawhi Leonard. Now, make no mistake, we think he's an MVP candidate. We think he's the best player on one of the best teams in the NBA. We think he's great. We think he's fantastic. The only thing that's happened this season is his points have gone up. Well, his efficiency has basically stayed the same, and his overall game has basically stayed the same, if not gotten worse, thanks to inflation topic we don't really have time for on this show. But, obviously players improve because in theory they get better at shooting and stuff. So we're looking at Kawhi right now, and we're going, all of these people are saying, oh my God, he's amazing. He's having the best season of his career. And we're going, he's great. But we don't know what you're seeing because the numbers don't back it up. But anyway, sorry, I'll let you get back.
No, that's good, and it's great that you have a current example because a lot of your listeners were probably infants when I did this work with Allan. So it's nice that you've got a current player that you can put out there for them. So so that was the first thing I wanted to mention to you was about that, just because that was pretty cool. I thought. I mean, it's nice when you suggest something. I mean, here's an NBA Finals team, and it actually shows up in the game. So after the first two games, they lost both of them, and I thought to myself, these guys probably can't beat the Spurs 5-on-5, but I'll bet they can beat them 3-on-3. Now, this was one of the last years for the illegal defense rule, and the illegal defense rule was if a big man goes outside the three-point line, his defender has to go with him. If a second big man went outside the three-point line, his defender would have to split the difference between the basket and the player. So I said, you've got Camby and Dudley, who are both fanatics about rebounding. They will sprint in from the three-point line, pull them outside, and let Charlie Ward, Allan Houston, Latrell Sprewell play 3-on-3 with the other guys from the Spurs. Well, I wrote it up. I gave it to Brendan Malone. I knew Brendan well because he was the assistant coach that worked with Chris most of the time. So when I was working with Chris, I would talk to Brendan. So anyway, it turns out they run that offense in game 3. Now, whether I just guessed what they were going to do or they used my suggestion, either way, I felt pretty good that they ran it. And that's the game they won. So as it turned, in fact, I think Sports Illustrated did an article about the fact, the way they were running it. And but then for some reason they changed, which made me think that maybe it was my idea that they were using and found out about it. But anyway, so those are a couple of things from the 98-99 season that I felt good about. I figured I'd throw them out there anecdotally. So now
I've definitely got a few comments on that. So I don't actually know if this is the same guy, Brian, but the Golden State Warriors had a film guy that made some suggestion. Do you remember that specifically, Brian?
Yeah, that's Nick Uren is his name. He was their video coordinator, and according to the legend, he's the one who suggested Draymond Green at center doing the small ball lineup in the finals.
Wow.
And so that happens, and they give him press, they give him credit. Now, what's interesting to me is, and I think I've said this to you a bunch, Art, is like, have I talked to Mavericks yet? I know I did a bunch pre-show.
Not really. No, I know where you're headed.
So like you've brought up, this is before you even work with Allan Houston in depth. You've got these stories of here's a suggestion, here's a suggestion. One of my favorite stories, we're probably gonna have to leave it on the cutting room floor. So follow Art and bug him on Twitter to get him to tell you the full story. Is you also have a story about you briefly interacting with Marcus Camby and giving him some advice in a locker room tunnel.
Oh, sure.
And he did play better the next game ago. Although, by the way, that kind of story, if you'd come to me, I'd be like, well, that's what I was expecting to say about this entire story. That's nice. Can't do anything.
Yeah, it's a one-off. You can't, right? Absolutely.
Yeah. But so Nick Uren gets credit for this just a suggestion, and so you're saying the same thing. And the Dallas Mavericks, one of my most hated stories. I wrote an article on this as well. It's called JJ Barea and the Analytics Debate. What ended up happening is Roland Beach, who works at a site 82 Games, or I don't think works. I think he created the site 82 Games, which uses a lot of lineup data, which we're not saying is bad data. We're just saying people tend to misuse it. He gets a job with the Mavericks. He's sitting on the Mavericks bench. The Mavericks are down 2-1 against the Heat, and he makes the suggestion that they should swap out Deshaun Stevenson with JJ Barea. And they end up doing this, and now they end up winning the finals. And he gets credit for this. This is brought up. One of my favorite writers, Kevin Draper, brings this example up all the time. The Slow Analytics Conference, which sadly you and I both had to miss this year, Art, gave an award to Rick Carlisle for this decision. And so the reason I bring both that up and Nick Uren up is that these stories you're telling, these one-offs, I gave them a suggestion for a game. I gave him a suggestion for a game. When we get to Allan Houston in 2000, even more, the number of things in basketball analytics history that have gotten so much more credit than you, so much less. Like that's the problem, right? The JJ Barea thing, I read this entire article going, JJ Barea sucked in game 3 and they lost by 3. So why on earth would you want to start him in game 4? They won game 4 with JJ Barea on the bench, and they were down by 7 when JJ Barea was finally pulled. So, I mean, if an analytics guy comes up to you and says, look, guys, you're down 2-1 in a must-win game. Here's what you do. You put in Barea and you'll be down by 7 with 9 minutes to go, but, don't worry, you'll pull it out. They look at you like you're crazy and go, why would we ever put ourselves in a position to be down by 7? These people get credit for these small sample size things that in some cases, the Barea case is bullshit. It got me cussing on air, Brian. It is a bullshit example of analytics. It's one of my most hated ones. I love Kevin Draper. I can't believe he brings it up. It is what angers me and infuriates me about how people use analytics, because it's some guy with a calculator giving you some number that doesn't mean anything, that makes you make some decision that might or might not work. And the most perfect example you brought up, Art, pre-show that we have to give, same team, the Mavericks in 2000, was it 7, Brian? 2006, 2007, I believe. They bench Eric Dampier, however you say it, apologies, because their analytics guy, I believe Wayne Winston, tells Avery Johnson that the lineups don't match up as well. Now, according to our numbers, Eric is one of their best players. So they bench one of their best players, and they get upset as a number 1 seed to a number 8 seed. So just the exact, the fact that people will quickly forget, that this was an analytics decision made on BS data that didn't work out. They forget those. They remember the ones that work. But to your point, Art, it makes me sad that you have stories that basically are in that same realm. You're not getting awards at Slow, though, not to my knowledge, at least.
Yeah, Dre, to jump in there, I think you're talking about the season the Mavericks lost to the Warriors when they were the number 1 seed. Is that right? Dampier was one of their best players during the regular season.
And this was, and their analytics guy said you should play small against the Warriors, a trap that many a team have fallen for now that they're good still, Brian. Play small against the Warriors. You don't want them out small ball you. They did that by sitting one of their best players. And ironically, Brian, I think we had this discussion when the Cavs were playing the Warriors. The Cavs really had no shot. Kevin Love, Kyrie Irving were both injured, but they were keeping in it somehow. And I remember there were a few times they benched like Timofey Mozgov, who's one of their few good players, as a big to play small. So it's a dumb strategy that teams still fall for. But as I mentioned, people like this still get credit for being analytics driven with that kind of data. And sorry for that long tangent, Art, but just to bring it back to you, far smaller sample size with far less impact than the stuff you've done.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I appreciate the kind words. So I guess we're going to talk about 99-2000. At this point.
I think you don't necessarily want to share the secret. I mean, obviously you're still trying to get hired and paid for this, which, that's actually, I don't want to go too far down it because I said you weren't too, didn't want to get in that. But something that's been very fascinating to me about your work, Art, is you've dealt with NBA stars, and I think this is one area that analytics geeks such as myself tend to not quite understand how things work, because we go, you've got these numbers that say these players are great. Just sign the good players, just put them on the court together, go. And I think we often misunderstand how much ego juggling and dealing with agents and front offices and, I signed this guy, but that guy's not the coach's guy. You dealt with a lot of that. So I'd be really interested in what you would be willing to share and talk about just how interesting, not even from an analytics, what you told him to do, but just how hard it was to work with Allan, just to like dealing with coaches, agents, etc.
Okay. Well,
Allan himself, in fact.
Sure. Okay. Well, I'll get into a little of that. And basically what happened was during the summer after the finals, I went by Allan's house and talked to him about doing some more work together. Well, Allan had been traditionally a slow starter every season, and he wouldn't really start playing well until after the All-Star selections. That's a bit of a problem if you want to be an All-Star. So he asked me to work with him for the 99-2000 season. We specifically set a goal of him making the All-Star team. Now, obviously, neither he nor I, number one, expected he wasn't going to be voted in by the fans. He was not that kind of loved, and very respected in New York, loved by the fans, but it's not drawing those kind of numbers from voting. So it was going to have to be something that the coaches were going to vote him on. And again, we had no control over that, but that was our goal, was to get him in a position where the coaches would feel good about putting him on the team. So anyway, what ended up happening was I tried to talk to Jeff up at Summer League in Boston. It's one of the last years that they had it up there.
So Jeff Van Gundy, the coach of the Knicks at the time.
Right. Yes. And Jeff's not a big fan of outsiders. Let's just put it like that. So I was an outsider, and so that was not a good thing. So we were supposed to talk in September, I think. But I had just spoken to Allan. He just hired me. And we were planning to start working in September. And I figured I needed to talk to Jeff just because, even out of courtesy. I mean, back when I was coaching, which only went up through D3 college, if somebody was messing around in the head of my best scorer, I'd want to know what was going on. So I figured, at least as a courtesy, I should talk to Jeff. So anyway, I don't hear from Allan. We get into September. So I put together a contract, and one of the things that happens with players, they change their phone numbers a lot. So the number I had for Allan, I guess it was like 3 old. So I flew cross country, went to his house. He says, "Oh yeah, I want to do the work." And so I give him a sample contract to give to his agent. And it had a salary. I believe that it's better to charge one fee, because you never want your client to say, "Gee, I need to speak to Art, but is it worth another $2,500? Is it worth, whatever."
That is fascinating on both fronts. Try to get onto like a behavioral psychology standpoint, because from the first side, the like charge what you're worth, I think, is a problem that people fail to recognize a lot, right? You said two brilliant things that I would give as advice to anybody out there looking to work with anybody, NBA team regardless, is get a contract. Like I've had experience, not myself, but like I've had friends that are freelancers and stuff. And oh my gosh, if you don't get a contract, it's such a mess. My dad's a lawyer, so I've definitely learned from that. Get a contract, charge what you're worth. But the upfront fee is very interesting. I think it might work on two fronts. Let me know your thoughts on this. One, if it's because it's upfront, it's going to be a larger number, so you're going to seem more valuable. And then you just pointed out the second thing is you don't want people scared to use the resource that they've paid for.
Right. And in fact, if a player thinks, if a client of mine thinks, I wonder if I should call Art, at that point he should, because he's now doubtful. I'm not sure, he's uncertain. I don't want an athlete being uncertain about anything, because that can translate into the game. I want him confident. So even if he called me up and we talked and I said, "You're all set. We don't have to do any work. You're all set." Now he's confident that everything's good, and he's going to carry that going forward. So, and yeah, as far as something with fees as well, it's better to go in and charge a good fee and discount it than it is to discount it up front. And basically, you want people to respect what you do. And we have, at least in the US, we tend to think that the higher the fee, the better the person is. So if you have, you said your father's an attorney. If you have a $300 an hour attorney and a $500 an hour attorney, who's the better attorney? Well, you don't really know unless you can actually evaluate the work, but most people are going to think the $500 an hour guy is better because he charges more. So, I gave, I put together a package expecting I was going to negotiate down, but actually what I wanted to do was work with the team. And I figured part of my deal with Allan, the only way I took Y2K off, so I left 6 figures of IT consulting money on the table to work with him, but I've been looking for somebody like Allan for years, and this was my opportunity. But one of my contractual requirements, and it was even a requirement before I worked with him that first time in the prior season, was that when he gets the results that I promise him, he gets me some good publicity. Taking a year off, leaving 6 figures is a big deal, but when you're going to go to New York, the media capital of the world, you're going to work with the starting shooting guard for the New York Knicks. I mean,
one of the rough things for me watching this in hindsight, and what we know now, right, is because you basically came in right at the start of the Dolan era, is you chose, it's not your fault, right? Like all of the numbers, like we would have backed you, right? New York, I did this analysis once. If you were going to place 5 new NBA teams, you'd basically put 3 of them in New York, 1 of them in Los Angeles, and 1 of them in Chicago. Okay. Based on media size, amount of free money, the entire, and despite the fact that there are already, 2 NBA teams there, several football teams, the amount of condensed wealth and eyeballs in New York is such that best media market in the world to go to, right? We're routinely baffled as to why stars don't give New York more credit, right? In the free agent market, they obviously love New York, even up until Kobe, right? I think they were still attracting Dwight Howard, as recently as a couple of years ago. I got to buy now that Magic's back in charge. They'll attract some more. The question is if they'll get the right one, like, if they'll get players like Kevin Durant or if they'll get players like DeMar DeRozan, remains to be seen. But, you would assume that New York is the place to be. You're going in right after they've been to the finals. They've never been hotter. They've got some of the best players. You walk head first into the Dolan-era Knicks right at the start before any of us knew. And that's like the worst place. Like there is not, I think this is a running theme, actually, Art. You get to join the ranks of Jason Kidd and Tyson Chandler here. There is a worse place to take great analytics performance to just be wasted than the New York Knicks. At least I'll phrase it that way.
I think you probably making some real good points there. It was funny because I had worked with Allan. For me, it was a wager. It was not a gamble. I mean, a gamble is I'm throwing dice. I don't know what's going to come up. A wager is I'm putting money on something that I'm, going to get a better return on. I'd already worked with Allan, so I knew what kind of results we could get. If I'd worked with him in 98, 99, and instead of going for 30 on 58% from the floor, 59, whatever it was, he'd gone, 5 for 17, I would not have looked at taking, a year off and doing that work. I would have come up with something else. But anyway, I give him this contract, and he said, okay, well, I'm going to give it to my agent, and I'm going to have him tell him it's top priority. Well, that's really great. And then like 2 weeks later, I still haven't heard from the agent. And there was a payment that Allan was supposed to make for the work I'd done with him prior season, and the check doesn't show up. And I call his money people in Detroit, because remember he'd been with the Pistons, and so he still was based out of there, at least financially. And they said, "Oh yeah, Allan called us and said not to send the check, and if you had a question, call the agent." Well, of course I'm gonna have a question. Let's call the agent, and the agent tells me that he told Allan that I was trying to cheat him. And the reason I was trying to cheat him was I was asking for travel expenses from San Diego to New York. Now remember, I'm taking a year off, so it's not like
you and I both have backgrounds in consulting. This is very standard.
Right.
You know, what's funny. Sorry to get a little off tangent.
Yeah.
I don't know what kind of consulting companies you've worked at. I mean, obviously the travel stuff gets amusing because people who work as consultants tend to have HR departments that are like, did you really try and upgrade your seat for $20 extra when you could have saved us $20 by flying out 3 hours later? Did you really need to get a queen size bed? Couldn't you have just gotten, downgraded yourself into a smoking room for less? So, it's funny because you're pointing out he's looking at it like you're trying to cheat me. And if you're from the same consulting world I was in or was from, or even anywhere similar, it's like you're asking for this money and it's usually like pulling teeth to get a little extra money that if you were at a day job making just normal hourly wage, if you break down the amount of money it costs, it's ridiculously small.
Oh yeah, you're absolutely right. And what I was asking for coach travel. I was asking to stay. There was a Courtyard by Marriott around the corner from where they practiced. I was asking for $25 a day for food. Now think about the New York area. I mean, I just,
oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, I was not trying to turn this into an income proposition. So, but anyway, when you're going to be doing work with somebody's head, you need them to trust you. I mean, go through the 48 laws of power, any of this stuff. Your integrity is something that, once you lose it, you can't get it back. And, or it's very hard to get it back. And so I go out of my way to be, I try to have a lot of integrity anyway, because I believe people should have integrity. But certainly when I'm working with a client, I don't say anything that could be interpreted multiple ways. I make sure that what I mean is what is said, because you don't want somebody to start questioning. That's why I like the one fee instead of per session. Art says I need a session. Do I really need a session, or is he just trying to make another week's pay? Well, no. So this is why, I try to get rid of all that. So I end up having this long discussion with the agent, and he finally admits that, yes, like you said earlier, travel expenses are traditional business expenses. But in the meantime, I've had this conversation with Allan, who's told me, and because his agent told him, that if a doctor flew out to work with him, the doctor would pay his own way. And I said, the only way a doctor is flying out and not charging you specifically, is he's charging you an all-inclusive fee, and he's not flying coach, he's flying first class.
Or he's like a doctor that's getting paid a heck of a lot of money. Yeah, there are no situations where that doctor's going to come out for nothing. Right.
But anyway, the problem with this is that even though the agent finally agreed with me, that really never got put through to Allan. Allan from that point on was very difficult to deal with, in a large part because we'd had a great relationship, and then all of a sudden it was really strained. So anyway,
two questions, by the way. First off, what does your time schedule look like? I know it's kind of a break in what has otherwise been a great flow. My time, actually, because my son has a bedtime and has been going to bed at 9, so I'm actually free. But I know your time is valuable. So, Brian gave me the 15-minute warning. We can go overtime. So, basically, I'll give you the option of at any point that you need to leave, just go ahead and duck out.
Okay.
But I wanted to be cognizant.
Great. Yeah.
And I'm okay to just keep going. I'll give a shout out to another podcast I listened to this week. If you don't listen to the How Did This Get Made? There's a behind the scenes story. They had like an extra podcast with the director of a movie they saw called Surf Ninjas. This guy has all these great stories. What's amusing, similar break, like 3/4 of the way through, he's like, do you really want me to just keep talking about these stories? He's like, I feel like I'm wasting your time. And the guy's like, no, keep going. So I'm in the same boat, but I just wanted to make sure that you're not like trying to rush out the door.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. This is great. So, and I won't talk too much more about the challenges, but the challenges lead into why the data is as it is. So, that's a good thing. I think that had the agent not put this doubt into Allan's head about, whether I was, acting honestly with him or not over traditional business, business travel expenses, I think we would have done a lot more work together. Actually, as it turns out, it wouldn't have cost him another penny. We could have worked 82 games, would have cost him another penny. So
I've got a few, I've got a note and a question on that.
Sure.
So just an interesting note about, just the trust and all of this. That's very fascinating to me about, NBA games, et cetera, is, just how many, we've talked about this before, how many competing parts you have, right? Like you're a star player on a team. There's a rookie they've just signed. Think Kobe Bryant and any, rookie shooting guard. We've talked D'Angelo Russell. We don't have time for it, so I'm even going to throw off the table. Just as an example, Kobe Bryant, D'Angelo Russell on the Lakers. You've got these people staring at each other, right? This guy's gunning for my job. This guy's gunning for my, I might not get another contract if this guy gets playing time. You've got teammates, this guy, maybe Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook. This guy's hogging the ball from me. As you're mentioning, you've got agents saying things in the air. We've heard all sorts of stories about that. What's fascinating to me, as you pointed out, just how important trust is in coaching relationships and teammate relationships. And it's something that I actually hadn't thought too much about, because the NBA is this place where there is not a lot of trust. And it's one of these areas where we routinely shake our heads and go, why aren't people better at coaching?
Sure. It's, if you think about it, you get players that a lot of them come from poor backgrounds, but even the ones that don't, all of a sudden, they just have this huge amount of money. They got people coming out of the woodwork. Oh, I've got a business idea, if you can fund me for this. And, and you see the number of pro athletes that have had to go sue their business managers, financial managers, stuff like that. And so they're
parents, man, when they have to sue their parents and stuff and family for money.
It's tough, but they are taught in the rookie camps. I know the NBA pretty much tells them this, and I'm pretty sure I've seen clips from the NFL as well. Basically, don't trust anyone, because and that ends up, you see some of these guys that are supporting their whole families. They got like 30 people in their on the payroll. And what they don't realize is that that's one income stream that's now being dispersed to 31 people, the player and the other 30, as opposed to those 30, being out and earning money from, working at other places. So now you've got multiple income streams. So all of a sudden the player, maybe he gets injured, he doesn't get another contract, or he gets 1 year less than he thought he was going to. And, all his money's been, is going to people that are having a good old time because he's a pro. So,
we mentioned this ESPN 30 for 30 a ton, but the ESPN 30 for 30 broke is just a much watched on this, because I think most people, when you start saying it, right, Allan Houston, right, they named a rule after him for getting overpaid so much.
Yeah.
People will go, why am I going to have sympathy for this guy? But to your exact point, most people don't think about the fact that every single coach that you've worked with on your way to stardom thought they might be getting a piece or a job, assistant coaching or something. You've got a bunch of family that's going to think the same way. I think Spike Lee's movie, He Got Game, brings up all these points. So yeah, I think
sure.
You point up a fantastic point, which I think is funny. It makes NBA coaching, I have a little more respect for it in that regard, because you're working with people, like you're saying. To coach them, to get them to listen to you, requires a great deal of trust. And you have people that from the get-go are in a mode that's like are being told everybody is out to get you, everybody's trying to screw you. And the rough part about it is they're not actually wrong. In many cases, that is actually true.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And one other thing about it is, because it's so public, a lot of the things you might do as say a high school coach that would work, like say benching a star for not listening and following your instructions. You do that in an NBA game, as a coach, you're going to get grilled for it. You better be very confident in how secure you are with the team, or at least know that you're going to get picked up by another team if you go and do something that publicly makes one of your star players, look bad. So I mean, that's the kind of thing you have to put at the end of your list of things to do, where if you're not being covered by the media, say like in high school, you might put it right up front, and you'll get better compliance putting it right up front. So anyway, there's a whole bunch of things that you have to deal with for sure. But I do know that one of the things that agents tend to be concerned about, and I've heard this from not only Allan's agent at the time, but a couple of agents I approached about and asked them to represent me. They're very concerned that you're going to go in and steal their client from them. And, if I wanted to be an agent, I would have gone to law school, So, I mean, I've got a couple of things that I have done in the NBA that are unique, and I'm pretty good at them. And I don't see any reason to go and do something that somebody else and many people are good at.
Here in the trust mode and all the thing that you're just saying, I'm going to drop his name. So Brian, I know I just texted you as well. I pinged Brian, the producer, because you were talking. I didn't want to interrupt you. But the other thing is, the new GM of the Lakers is an agent. That worked with me, and I can't believe I'm dropping his name. So Brian, if you know off the top of your head, let me know.
Rob Pelinka.
Thank you. But yeah, Raw, and basically I'm reading up on it. It seems very, the way it's being told, it's very conniving, and this behind the scene agent that was working with Lakers, that was working with Kobe, was just waiting for his chance to strike and strike, come out of nowhere. Very Games of Thrones. So it's funny to your point where the same crowd of people, right? You're talking about these people being untrusted. Well, they're in a group of people that are notoriously, people snipe each other's agents, or agents try and snipe each other's clients all the time. So they're not wrong, but it makes your job that much harder.
Right. Because now if I said, hey, I'm an agent that's a shooting coach, now I can understand why no agent would want to let me work with their player, because, I go in as a shooting coach and then all of a sudden I've got myself a new client. So, but that's not what I do. I do mental zone work. I do shooting coaching, end of story. I have no desire to, represent a player or anything like that. So, but that's the kind of thing that happens. Everybody's watching out. And one of the things you'll find out, and you may already know this, people tend to, they don't so much want to get better. Okay. I know a lot of players that know what I do and know that it would make them better. What they will tend to do, and I know coaches that know if they brought me in, their teams would be doing better. A couple of coaches that are fighting for the 8th spot right now, in fact. But it tends to be a pain-driven decision-making process. So like with Allan when he was in this big slump, I think if I had talked to him in LA when he was playing some pretty good ball, said, hey, I do this stuff. How about sitting down with me? I think he would have politely said, well, let's talk down the road, and I'd never heard about it again. I happened to catch him in New York when he was in a 13-game slump, and it was in the papers, a whole bunch of things. So now you got some pain, and how can I get away from the pain? Oh, well, Art's here. He says he can do this. Let's try it out. That type of thing. So a lot of what happens with me is I've got to be in the right place at the right time.
And something I've called this the Spurs maintenance mode. I've never put it in an article. But the idea is if you're an NBA team, you've got to constantly be in maintenance mode. You've got to constantly be making yourself better. Dean Oliver put this in his book, Basketball on Paper, where, there's this myth of the treadmill of mediocrity, this idea that if you're an average team, you're just going to keep getting you're going to keep getting medium draft picks, and you're just going to keep being an average team. Not quite. The reality is that if you're in the NBA and you're a great team, you got LeBron James. LeBron James is going to get older. LeBron James might leave. You're going to start declining if you don't do something to, augment the fact that LeBron James is going to eventually get worse, or that some of your star players are going to, your rookie contracts are going to get better and demand a raise, and you have to let them go or sign them, and that means you lose out on role players. So if you're in the NBA and you want to stay good, you have to be perpetually in maintenance mode, perpetually making yourself better. But it's really hard to go up to, a 60-win team. This is something we've had trouble with forever. We'll bash the Oklahoma City Thunder when they had Durant and Westbrook and Ibaka, and they'd already lost Harden, which was already a mistake. But when they had those three players and they were playing Kendrick Perkins and Derek Fisher major minutes, we said, what the hell is this team doing? They really need to get a better point guard. They really need to get a better center. They really need to amnesty Kendrick Perkins and figure something out. And of course, at the time, people are going, what are you talking about? This is a team that just made it to the finals. This is a team that's doing great. They're top of the Northwest Division. Why are they worried? And to your exact point, the funny thing is people will look when everything's gone awry. When the Los Angeles Lakers are in complete disrepair, they'll go, what do we need to do to fix this? And you go, well, it's good that you're looking now, but you really should have been looking 2-3 seasons ago.
Right.
But that's a very common human issue.
It is. It happens in business all the time. It is much better. Like I've got a friend who's an outstanding salesman who's had to change his approach on getting appointments, because it is much better for somebody in a company to not do anything rather than do something and possibly be fired because he made the wrong decision. So it actually, that even gets into making appointments. And there's a guy wrote a whole book about it called The Power to Get In. And so anyway, a lot of that's NLP based. In fact, NLP you use a lot of leverage, and the leverage has to do with the particular player or the particular individual. Not only are they moving towards pleasure, are they moving away from pain, some combination thereof. A lot of times it's the exact wording, the whole bunch of things that come into it. But that's what's going to A, get them to do the work, and then B, have the work be successful. I remember I sat with Allan, and Allan is known to, let's just say, be a thrifty individual. Okay. Not the word that was used, but I'm being polite. I flew out to do some work with him, and we did an hour and nothing was coming out. I was trying to figure out why is this happening? Couldn't get anything. So I said to him, finally, at the end of the hour, I knew he had to get ready for a game. And I said, okay, I'll come out again in a couple of weeks. Well, that meant more travel expenses. And all of a sudden he says, no, wait a minute. And then he says, like, a couple of things I can't repeat here because I don't repeat what, my clients tell me. But he comes out with 2 sentences that immediately tell us the whole problem. We do a 5-minute process and the problem's over. End of story. He goes out and shoots lights out that night. Had I not said, I'll come back out, if I said, well, I'll call you from San Diego, we might never have gotten to it. But in that case, Allan didn't want to spend additional money. I don't blame him for that, but that was a motivator there. And all of a sudden we got the answers we needed. So you see this kind of thing happen a lot. So anyway, the final piece just is a whole slew of story. You know the backstory here. We could do a series on this.
So much long, and in fact, I mean, just to at least get the. Actually, I don't want to give the idea. I've heard this is an issue. If you have a good idea and you say it out loud, you get the endorphin rush of as if you had started the idea or done it. I'm not going to say anything, so I'm actually got it. That's a horrible transition. So yeah, but clearly we could keep going for hours and hours. But let's see. We've talked about some of your issues with Allan and the agent. We'll see if we actually. I'll use this as a segue because you can decide if you want to talk about Jeff Van Gundy. So there's an important part narratively of this story I find that's really impressive, and it's in the article. So definitely check out the Allan Houston case study or refresh yourself if you haven't read it recently, listener. And basically, here's what happens. You're trying to help Allan become an all-star. It is worth noting, I looked at the numbers while we were talking. He placed 3rd in the East, actually, in guards. Now, of course, though, I'm surprised by the other one. I guess I don't remember history as well. He places behind Allen Iverson. No surprise there. Allen Iverson, in fact, gets more all-star votes than the next 3 guards put together. So no
wow.
There. I mean, this is we call him overrated, but this is right before his MVP season. It's when he's leading the league in scoring. No shocker. Number 2 is Eddie Jones, who beats out Allan Houston by 130,000 votes, but he does end up being the 3rd highest guard in all-star voting in the Eastern Conference. You might argue some of that issue is the guard position seems a little weak, but is what it is. So you get Allan into the All-Star game, which is one of your goals. And as you mentioned, for his career, this is important because he does go on. Like I said, one of the most impressive parts about Allan Houston is the fact that he has a clause in a CBA now named after him. He has the Allan Houston rule, which was never used on Allan Houston, but was basically saying, we spent all of this money on a player needlessly. We do not want to spend it. Are we allowed to just amnesty them and give him the money? And that's he signed a 5-year, $80 million contract in 2002 or something for that. So
no, it was 100.4, and as it turned out that summer, they thought he was probably going to be up for a max contract. The max contract that he was eligible for, I believe, was $72 million. So nobody else was trying to get him, and the Knicks gave him an extra $28 million. I think so they could say, hey, we have a $100 million player.
So what's interesting too is I think I'll try and get this up in front of me because I haven't actually talked about this before. If I recall, I think the Allan Houston rule is actually from the 1999.
No, it's about 2003
it is
or 4. Yeah.
Okay. Because I was going to say, if it's from the 99, it doesn't make any sense. But okay, so yeah, he's to this huge contract that he really doesn't deserve. But you can take some credit for this too. You arguably helped him earn that because you got him to all-star status a few seasons before.
Yeah.
But the bigger problem for you, and I didn't really get into this in the article, but it's a fascinating part of the story I have to discuss. You helped alter. Arguably, right? You've said this yourself. You're a piece. You're not the whole thing. Obviously, Allan Houston put in a lot of the work himself too, so he did that. The Knicks have great players like Marcus Camby, so it's not. I'm not saying like it's your fault or trying to give you the credit, but Jeff Van Gundy ends up coaching the All-Star game as a result of the Knicks playing so well to start the 1999-2000 season. Now, I believe the issue was it the year before the Miami Heat with Pat Riley? He had started it, and the rules are you're not allowed to start back-to-back. So
right. You can't coach it back-to-back, right?
the Knicks were the number 2 seed out east, but because of that, Jeff Van Gundy gets in. You've already said Jeff Van Gundy has issues with outsiders, but this helps elevate Jeff Van Gundy's stock. You've mentioned to me he was up for a contract year. So you both, Allan, so to clarify what happened, Allan hires you to coach him the 1999-2000 seasons we were mentioning. Because of agents, Allan, Jeff Van Gundy, who I might get to in a second, you only end up coaching him 30 games, but that gives us a perfect subset to look at the difference in performance with and without. And the performance with is so staggering, it's ridiculous. And the impact of that performance, as we mentioned, is arguably helped the Knicks win a couple extra games, which got Jeff Van Gundy to the All-Star game, which probably helped Jeff Van Gundy's stock come contract renegotiation time with the Knicks, which kept him in power at the Knicks. And this is a guy that's not a fan of yours. So I wide open to what you would want to talk about.
Okay, well,
and all of that.
Sure. So here's the thing. First of all, just to put the history a little. There's one thing on the timeline. Jeff, it was well known. It was reported, in fact, multiple outlets, that the 98-99 season, Jeff didn't just have to make the playoffs. He had to go a couple of levels, a couple of rounds, or he was going to be fired. That whole thing with Ernie Grunfeld being let go, I mean, to me, it's insane that somebody would put their job on the line just to force out an executive, but anyway, so it was some weird times, and I don't know all the ins and outs of why this happened or that happened, but it did. So in fact, my agreement with Allan was, as I said, that he'd get me positive media attention as soon as he saw the results. Well, the night after we worked the first time, he saw the results, didn't say anything. And that night is a little interesting Jeff story. That night, after the game, Jeff told people when he was asked why Allan played so well, he says he's not listening to the wrong people anymore. And I asked Allan, I said, who are the wrong people? Who are you listening to before? He says, I have no idea who he's talking about. Now, remember that. I'm going to get back to that in a second. So I don't push Allan for the media attention because now Jeff said something publicly. I don't want my client at odds with his coach. And then I find out that, after Jeff makes it to the finals, that they're renegotiating and getting him an increase. He's already got a couple more years on his contract, so they're getting him an increase and an extension. So I decide not to say anything because I don't want Knicks management to have any reason to undercut Jeff. I figure it's better to hope that, Jeff does well and is happy and finally sits down with me. Anyway, but realistically speaking, I think, as I said, I'm one of the people that helped them make the playoffs, and it's really because of Allan's response. They don't make the playoffs. You get Jeff's resume no longer has an NBA Finals coach on it. It also, the following year, and I'll explain the details, wouldn't have had the All-Star coach, and he would have been a coach that had been fired for getting his boss, the GM, fired. So, would he have gone to Houston as a head coach? Maybe, maybe not. But if he'd gone there without finals coach, without all-star coach, would they have paid him $4 million a year? Maybe not. Maybe it would have been less. There's a whole bunch of dominoes. Would he be on ESPN? Because at that point, he would have been a guy, much like myself, unfortunately, not really video friendly, shall we say, and he would have just been one of many coaches that get fired and fall to the wayside. But when he leaves the Rockets, he's a guy that has All-Star and NBA Finals coach. That's impressive, and he did a lot. He did a lot to do that. But there's you pull out one card from the house of cards and the whole thing comes down.
Well, one thing I think Andrew Sutton, one of the regular co-hosts of the show, would appreciate, maybe a lesson that sucks that you had to learn it this way, although it sounds like you tried your best to do as much business savvy stuff, getting contracts, getting paid up front, et cetera, is, Andrew calls it like get your money. Like, obviously, the rough part about the NBA, and I know this puts you at odds with some of the trust stuff you're saying, so I don't think there was actually an easy way for you to do it. It's like, if you're trying to get paid in the NBA and someone else is, it's a very cutthroat business, and the way to navigate that is really rough because you try and be polite and let the coach get credit or respect. And as you're kind of noting, that coach might come out and make sure that someone else doesn't get hired in the future, and that's really rough. And it comes to politics. Sure. Candidly, one thing that all of our back and forth together has unfortunately resulted with me is, like, I was already, as you know, when we started, kind of apathetic to working in the NBA or with, even mainstream media. I was kind of saying, sure, it's a pay cut and all this stuff. And then all this talking to you, I'm like, yeah, you're not really encouraging me to try and pursue anything. It's not like I want to go to Sloan and hand my resume to anybody, because it's like, yeah, this is just such amazing stuff that you went through, and it's definitely rough.
It's been interesting. Well, I want to talk some detail about 99-2000, but I want to finish up on a story. So I'm going to go to the very end of that regular season. Allan and I have had some problems, so I haven't worked with him now at the end of the regular season. I worked with him for a few weeks at least, and he's in a big slump. And I fly out to work with him, and I had spoken to Kevin Kernan of the New York Post in January of 2000, and I told him what was going on, and he was covering the Knicks at the time, and I wanted him to do an article. I'd met him the year before during the finals, and I mentioned to him about Jeff telling the reporters after that first game that Allan stopped listening to the wrong people. So I do the work with Allan. He shoots lights out, 60-something%, I think, against the Pistons at the Garden. It wasn't the last game of the regular season. It was the last home game, I guess. The next night they played in Boston. So I'm waiting for Allan, and there's a section, you got a credential, and I'm sitting in the section waiting for him to come get me. And all of a sudden, Kevin Kernan, who I haven't spoken to in months, walks out, looks up into the stands, sees me, waves, and calls me down. So I go talking to him. I said, so how did you know I was here? And I said, did Allan tell you? He says, no, I haven't talked to Allan yet. He says, well, I was just listening to Jeff. And Jeff said that the reason Allan played so well was he stopped listening to the wrong people. And I said, Jeff must know I'm here. So, and that's how Kevin knew to come out and look for me, was because Jeff said the same thing. So that was, I think, unfortunate, but that's the kind of stuff I was dealing with, kind of Mickey Mouse, but what can I say?
And I realized, so Brian, our producer, has given us about 10 minutes. That was a few minutes ago, so I'm going to try and wrap this up. But one thing I realized, we've had you on the show before, so you've talked this a little bit, and we're definitely going to have you on again to just talk free throws. I don't want to give away any secret sauce. I still want you in the NBA for no other reason than I want data, and I know you're one person that if you got in, you'd actually you would do stuff to get me good data as opposed to other stuff, regardless.
Absolutely.
What I was going to say is there anything specific you want to talk about that you find important with how you worked with Allan and other ways that you would work with, without giving away the secret sauce, without giving it away for free? Because obviously that's the most intriguing part is, right, just to clarify, Allan's performance with Art coaching him was so much different. It's just ridiculous. And it could just be a good synergy, right? It might not be that you work with everybody. It could just be that you worked really well with Allan. But that being said, is there anything you want to talk about, kind of the process that you can give away
Sure.
and what you see other players in the NBA that could benefit?
Sure, absolutely. Well, so here's the thing. Without getting into specifics, because I don't need to, it works out well. An athlete, well, all of us actually, we have our brain represents things when we're in our zone. Whether if you're writing code, which I do, sometimes you're flying. Everything's going right. You don't have to go back and add some variable that you forgot. I mean, you're cranking. Some other times that's not as good. Same thing with players. We see this going on. Somebody will shoot 50% one night, and then they'll shoot 42, 43, maybe 35. And they don't know they were in their zone, let's say, when they were shooting 50. They don't know how they got there, though. And so what I'm able to do is help them identify what's going on in their head at a time in a prior game when they shot lights out, let's say, or with this, tennis players, whatever we're working on. Maybe like tennis player, second serve wasn't going in as much as they wanted, that type of thing. So what can we do to get the second serve percentage up? So we identify what's going on in their head at a time that they played really well. And obviously, if they're playing at an elite level, whether it's an Olympic athlete or a pro or somebody in NCAA, they've got some great game in the past. And so we use that as the model. And then what we do is we look forward, say, okay, well, you got a game tomorrow night. Now we know what your head was doing, 2 years ago when you had that, your career best game. Let's see what your brain's representing tomorrow night like. And usually it's very different. We show them how to make that representation the same. And then they'll go out and shoot lights out. Now, one stat that I'm very proud of from working with Allan was that of the 30 games in that regular season, 27 of them, he shot 50% or better. Okay, that's 90% of those games, he was at 50% or better. Half of those games total, he was at 60% or better. And the 3 games that we didn't have him over, each one of them was a learning experience. One, he called me out and begged me to come work with him at the beginning of the season. And because the agent hadn't contacted me, I was reorganizing my office, didn't have my notes from the prior year, and just flew out on a red eye that night. I tried to do it from memory, screwed it up. First game of the regular season, 99-2000, he shoots 5 for 15. In the meantime, my friend had gone to my house, found my notes, faxed them to me. And the next night, so he goes 5 for 15 the first game, goes 10 for 15 the second game, goes 10 for 13 the third game. Then we get to the fourth game, and I was doing a process with him where we were doing a process. Took about a minute, but for each quarter: first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter. And and we'd always do it right before his nap. And after he hung up on the day of the fourth game, I'm thinking, geez, I've never done anything with him for overtime. Sooner or later, they're going to go to overtime. So I got to do something with him. But I didn't want to call him because I knew he'd be napping. Sure enough, that night they go to overtime. So if you look at his stats for the 48 minutes, he shot over 50%, but he got into the overtime and he was like, I don't know, 2 for 6 or something like that. They won the game. And then he has another game. I don't remember what he did the fifth game, but we have 2 of our 3 games that we didn't do well are in his first 5. And game 6, MSG runs a metric during the game. Allan Houston, greatest 5-game start to a season in his career. So wow. Greatest 5, and we've got 2 out of the 5 we screwed up. So, but that's the kind of thing that the power this has. I've been very fortunate to learn it. I stumbled into some changes that kind of make my ability to work with athletes somewhat unique. But I actually want to share it with people. I would love to see somebody like me on every team. You're going to have 30 teams. You're still going to have the same number of wins and losses, but instead of having these, nightmare games where somebody shoots, the team shot 30%, you'd have high scoring games and, players playing their best. So
I think something that you gave a fantastic way for me to transition and wrap us up. So for those of you listening, I'm going to call an audible on myself and say apologies for taking us into overtime. I've mentioned this to you, Art, every time you're on the show. It's just so easy to let you keep going. You got so many great stories. So there's actually a lot more stuff I want to talk about, but we're gonna leave that for future podcasts. The next one we want to talk actually might involve free throws. We might get into underhanded free throws. We might talk Wilt Chamberlain. We might talk Jeremy Lin and Steph Curry. Lots to discuss. But what I wanted to say about that last point you made that I just love, Art, is we're an analytics site. And we love the numbers, but one common refrain we've said, and Brian's made jokes about this because Draymond Green mentioned it, is like players aren't robots. And I think that's really important to remember is there's all these numbers, but when you're dealing with humans, you have to think of them as humans and how you want to get them in the mold. Now, ironically, that actually the way you're phrasing it, it actually does seem more like you're treating them like a robot. Here's how the brain works. Here's how these tools work. If we're going to program the brain, here's what we're going to do. So you actually are treating them like a robot, but the point being, so many coaches, so many analysts, I'm pointing the finger at us, just get the good players, put them on the court and go. And what I think is fascinating about the work you do, and I would love to see more of a synergy, because I think that's what's needed in NBA for us is you currently have analysts that look at the data and give the data to coaches. You currently have coaches that just talk to the player, don't really understand it. There's not a nice blend to say, here's how to get the data into the players' heads. And I from talking to you, it feels like you're the type of intermediary piece that seems to be missing, because we have all these offices with analytics staffs. We have all these offices with, in theory, very smart, shrewd coaches that Clearly, though, they're not getting together to push the data as effectively because, the three-point line's been in effect for over 30 years. We're only now starting to see teams pick up on it. That is way too slow for numbers to translate to action. So with that in mind, just, obviously the study, for those of you who haven't read it, definitely read it. Check out, I already messed it up. Your title is really long, Art. I'll say that for I remember Garden of the Good and Evil. So it's Game Time at the Garden of Good and Evil.
Right. That was a takeoff on Clint Eastwood's movie there, Midnight at the Garden of Good and Evil. So, but that's where that came from. And I had a lot of good and a lot of evil at the garden, so I figured it was appropriate. And
definitely check out Art on Twitter at Art Rondeau. Anything else you want to say to plug yourself? And I'm going to get us out so that Brian can go home and eat.
I just say spell my name ArtRondeau. That's at on Twitter, and all my links are on there. So please check it out. Any questions? Feel free to contact me.
All right. Well, that's been fantastic. We always love hearing from you, Art. We will see you next time. Brian, I'm not even going to do the major thing. Boxscoregeeks.com. Check us out on iTunes and Stitcher. The Boxscore Geeks show. Just make sure to subscribe, upvote if you want to hear more. We didn't do a live or anything this week, so I won't do all those other teasers. Thanks so much, everybody, for listening. We will see you next time.